He played the most stylish spy in the world. Pierce Brosnan had to deal with challenges off-screen that no screenplay could have prepared him for. 5 names he never forgot: fame, heartache, and betrayal. The person behind 007 for the first time. His stillness is broken. These 5 actors left an impact on him that he was unable to forgive, from icy betrayals to lost friendships. One assumed the part of his dreams. Filming was made a misery by another. Everything was almost destroyed by one. They are who? What actually took place? You may be surprised by the answers. It's not gossip. This is a private matter. Dalton Timothy. Pierce Brosnan suffered more than just a career setback when he initially learned that Timothy Dalton had been chosen to play James Bond. It had a personal touch. The two men had no animosity. They were pals, actually. That exacerbated the situation. Bond producer Albert Cubby Broccoli personally selected Brosnan as the franchise's future star back in the mid-1980s. Everything had lined up. He was attractive, charismatic, and possessed presence. Pierce was just what Ian Fleming's late husband had envisioned for Bond, according to his widow. Then again, his chances were dashed at the height of the excitement by an unforeseen event. When Remington Steele was cancelled in 1986, it appeared that Brosnan, who had been the main actor in the series, could finally don the Bond tuxedo. Broccoli had stated that the part was Brosnan's if he was able to act. It was more than rumors. During his time with his then-wife, Cassandra Harris, on the set of For Your Eyes Only, Brosnan received an invitation to meet the Bond crew. He was presumed to be the next 007 by all. But NBC recognized a chance to boost ratings as soon as the Bond whispers became more intense. Remington Steele was cancelled, but they later requested further episodes. The Bond offer had to be turned down by Brosnan because of his contractual duties. It was heartbreaking. At that point, Timothy Dalton took over. For years, even before Brosnan, Dalton had been on the Bond shortlist. And he was given the part when the chance arose again. From the sidelines, Brosnan watched as his close friend fulfilled the role that had been promised to him. Dalton had done nothing wrong in an opportunistic and backstabbing industry. He was just a backup plan. Pierce, meanwhile, felt as though he had lost a once-in-a-lifetime chance to a person he knew well. One of Brosnan's quotes was, "I had to smile through it." A huge personal and professional letdown was struck by that smile. The charm and comedy of Roger Moore were not present in Dalton's portrayal of Bond. In order to reflect the stress of the Cold War era, he purposefully made his Bond more grounded, gritty, and intense. However, not everyone was happy about the change. For example, the 1987 film Living Daylights earned well abroad, while the 1989 film License to Kill went poorly in the US, making only $34.7 million. Many fans and critics thought it lacked the spark that Brosnan could have added. Some even contended, in retrospect, that Dalton served as a stand-in, keeping the seat occupied until Brosnan could come back. However, at that moment, it seemed as though the door had been irrevocably slammed. It has been too difficult and simply painful for Brosnan to see a friend turn into a mere symbol of everything that has been taken away from him. That's exactly what the friend, Dalton, does. As the owner of the character, he turns into the symbol of pain. The devastating news that his wife, Cassandra, had ovarian cancer meant that Brosnan had to deal with the situation at this time. In fact, that pain made the professional hurt worse. That was more for her than for him in the Bond fantasy. Before anyone else, she had faith in him. Brosnan has lost his opportunity at Bond now since he was ill. And the man who was filling the gap was someone he used to drink and joke with. Fans now call those years the lost years, but Brosnan continued to work during them. From 1986 until 1994, he spied in the Fourth Protocol and appeared in Diet Coke ads that hinted at Bond's Ellington-like look without ever mentioning it. The pain never completely went away, but he remained visible. Bond's career was haunted by a ghost during those silent years. Bond, played by Dalton, flickered and flared. The moment for Brosnan never seemed to arrive. The appeal was then answered by Brosnan in 1994, when Dalton eventually resigned and the team looked for a new path. The part was finally, at last, his. The emotional burden, however, had not yet diminished. Even after he was officially introduced as Bond in 1995 with GoldenEye, the first movie in the franchise that would go on to make over $350 million worldwide, Brosnan never publicly expressed any resentment at Dalton. However, individuals in close proximity were fully aware of the past. One unexpected roadblock was Dalton. A decent man, indeed. For a minute, however, an indentation of pain in Brosnan's heart stole away. Pierce had no hatred for Timothy. He detested Timothy as a person. A postponed, closed-door dream. With one industry insider concluding, "and broken promise." But over time, those rounded edges haven't worn down. Brosnan's Bond's legacy eventually became recognizable. For a generation, he was the ultimate 007, and his 4 films brought in over $1.64 billion at the box office. However, beneath that polished exterior was the shadow of a friend who became a rival, Timothy Dalton. It's a nasty twist of time and contracts, but not malicious. It wasn't particularly difficult in a profession that was achieved by charm, considering Dalton's success, but Brosnan was expected to come first. If you found it difficult to lose Bond to a buddy, you should wait to learn what Pierce loses next. Christopher Brosnan. To the outside world, Christopher Brosnan was just the adoptive son of Pierce Brosnan. He was more than that, though, to Pierce. He offered a second opportunity at fatherhood, something he was never given. In 1980, Pierce married actress Cassandra Harris, who brought Christopher into his life. From a previous marriage, Cassandra had 2 children, Christopher and Charlotte. Pierce also formally adopted them after their biological father, actor Dermot Harris, passed away in 1986. More significantly, they took his love, but they also seized his name. Having promised to offer them everything he had been denied throughout his own shattered childhood, he became the father he never had. Initially, Christopher appeared to flourish under Pierce's tutelage. He was intelligent, vivacious, and incredibly close to both his sister and younger half-brother, Sean. Pierce once said that it wasn't a question of fatherhood when Cassandra and the kids entered his life. It was the act of family. They lived as one cohesive group for a number of years. However, things began to fall apart in 1991 when tragedy struck. Following a torturous 4-year battle, Cassandra was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and died. Her passing devastated the family. Both Christopher and Pierce lost the one person who had consistently provided him with emotional support and stability, respectively. The loss was more devastating than anyone could have predicted for Christopher, who was only 19 when Cassandra passed away. Christopher silently went into a downward spiral as Pierce buried his sadness in his job and into parenting. Working behind the scenes on Pierce's Bond movies, like As Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, allowed him to maintain a close relationship with the family. However, there were indications of instability. For driving under the influence in 1996, Christopher received a £1,000 fine. A year later, he was detained once more and given a 3-month prison sentence for a repeat crime. In an attempt to assist, Pierce extended olive branches and paid for legal fees, but something more fundamental had broken. Substances followed the arrests. Christopher became involved in the underground drug scene in London, first experimenting with GHB and then heavy drugs. Addiction spread rapidly. He passed out in front of a bar in London and went into a coma. At the age of 32, he was arrested once more in 2012 for possessing hard substances. His last name was given more attention by the vicious tabloids than his illness. He was seen by them as the Bond actor's addicted son. However, this was a nightmare for Pierce. His adopted son, like Cassandra, was vanishing before his very eyes. Under a burden he was unable to bear, another life was dying. Pierce was fully immersed in his family life. It went beyond love for kids. They were necessary to him. His kids kept him rooted in a field that frequently sapped men of their spirits. Christopher, however, came to symbolize the helplessness Pierce detested most. He supported Cassandra with every chemotherapy treatment, hospital stay, and restless night until he lost her. Now, he was acutely conscious of that helplessness as he watched Christopher be torn apart by the same agony. Pierce told a friend, "I hate what this world did to me," on a day when he was by himself. "I regret that I was unable to prevent it." By 2024, Christopher had committed a vanishing act that lasted for almost 20 years. Then the Slayer shot appeared. In London, the paparazzi discovered him alone, faded, and thin outside a food store. He appeared to be in the worst possible shape for his age of 51. It stood in stark contrast to those who recalled him as the happy youngster sitting next to Pierce on red carpets. As a man, he is only a shadow of his former self. It is a significant departure from the family dinners and the sets of Hollywood. The speed of life Pierce once attempted to establish was very different from their reality. Pierce remained silent about him, but never publicly condemned him. The resentment, the guilt, the hurt that tore at him. Christopher never had a traditional funeral, one filled with memories and sorrow. Death was never experienced by him. He simply disappeared. Bit by bit, year by year, the man became almost unrecognizable due to his addiction. Pierce had laid Cassandra to rest. Charlotte, his adopted daughter, died of the same disease that killed her mother, and he buried her in 2013. Christopher's death from yet another disease, one that resulted from pain and sadness, represented the tragic trinity of loss. 3 of his most beloved. There were 3 lives that were engulfed by forces Pierce could not control. Regarding Christopher, Pierce is largely silent in the media and on discussion forums. However, he occasionally speaks of him in a tone that seems almost rehearsed, as though he has been ready for it. Some sources assert that he doesn't say anything, while ensuring that he is aware of what occurs. Additionally, he calls some pals in London to check on the actor and sends help through outside means. According to one buddy, he never truly let go, even though he eventually learned to do so. He would say that sometimes love is insufficient. There are situations when the person you are attempting to save is unwilling to be saved. And that was essentially over and above Dalton. What Pierce still detests more than the studio executives who deceived him is this: Daniel Craig. Unbeknownst to him, Pierce Brosnan's role as James Bond would be his final one when he put up the shirt after Die Another Day in 2002. He was more than simply the face of a multi-billion-dollar franchise. He was a generation's Bond. That last movie had made $431.9 million, establishing it as the highest-grossing Bond movie at the time. Brosnan was at the top of his game, practicing for the next film, and already coming up with original ideas for Bond 21. Everything went according to plan until a single phone call cut everything off in 47 seconds. "You made a fantastic James Bond. Thank you very much. Goodbye." That was the message. Delivered chilly and without fanfare. In the background, the decision to call Brosnan was taken months in advance by Ian Productions. In order to revitalize the series and take it in a more gritty direction, they sought a younger Bond. While he was still promoting Die Another Day, Brosnan was unaware that the producers had already begun screen testing other actors, such as Daniel Craig. Later, internal communications would expose a harsh reality. Ironically, Brosnan was thought to be too old, too costly, and too Bond. The position that had kept MGM afloat and made him a world-renowned figure was handed over with startling indifference, and his own success had turned into his doom. Brosnan was heartbroken. Not only was he dismissed, but the manner in which it was carried out also left a profound wound of betrayal. After 4 successful Bond movies and almost 10 years of devotion, there was only a phone call, no meeting, no goodbye, no thank you gesture. When he was in the Bahamas by himself. Later, he claimed, it was very startling. "I was totally perplexed. We were doing Bond 21, I thought." The abrupt dismissal and the quiet in the studio were like a knife to the back. Additionally, Daniel Craig, an actor Pierce did not personally know, took over his role and came to symbolize everything that had been taken from him. There was an instant response when Daniel Craig was revealed as the new Bond in Casino Royale. Longtime admirers questioned why a blonde, lesser-known actor was chosen. Still recovering from recent injuries, Brosnan saw the franchise he helped revive be rebuilt without him. He made an effort to remain polite during interviews by stating, "I wish him well," but it was clear that he was in anguish. Insiders say that Brosnan felt caught off guard by more than just the studio, but by Craig himself not making any personal contact. The guy who had sustained the franchise during the 1990s was not acknowledged, nor was there a call or note. However, Casino Royale ended up becoming a huge hit. Critics commended Craig for his ruthless, emotionally unvarnished portrayal of Bond. It was a less glamorous and darker one. More Roger more than Jason Bourne. Brought the franchise under a new generation's wing and made $616.5 million. The achievement had a bittersweet effect on Brosnan. A survivor, on the one hand. Without him, the other did so. Later on, he would compare it to watching someone else raise your child. He lost a role, but much more. Something he had assisted in rebuilding from the flames had been erased from its future. The other problem was identity. Following the firing, Brosnan's career after Bond took a serious hit. From $12 million to $3 million, his price fell. He was devalued by the studios, who believed that he was too closely linked to Bond to be a successful actor elsewhere. He was too Bond, according to an executive's internal memo. Pierce had to reduce even his entourage. As a result, he fired 12 workers. Depression was severe. This is the first time his kids had seen him weep. In addition to the business setting, the rejection from Bond producers felt like personal desertion. The franchise's decision to ignore Brosnan merely seemed unprofessional. In an attempt to regain his footing, he worked on romantic comedies and independent films for a while before adding a number of high-profile projects, such as Black Adam, to his CV. Was the Room's ghost. With a disapproving tone, Brosnan watched Craig lay down 5 films over a 15-year period. Though his remarks over the years have made it apparent that he believes the entire process should have been done better, he has never publicly chastised Craig. In a rare moment of candor, he said, "There should have been more grace, more class. The alternative would have been to rejoice rather than discard him." Brosnan did not ultimately despise Daniel Craig. He detested Craig's principles. The quiet, the studio's abandonment, and the abrupt dismissal following 10 years of dedication. Craig became the symbolic substitute in Brosnan's thinking, even though he was never the antagonist. Pierce was promised the future, and that silent suffering has never gone away. Regarding that, Brosnan is polite. Craig, however, will always be a part of the actual scars left by Bond, according to those close to him. Hold on to your pity because you will be shocked by what follows. Contracts and casting have nothing to do with this. The situation became heated and was personal. A-list diva co-star Pierce Brosnan is renowned for being one of Hollywood's most polite and sensible performers. Despite mental pain, career betrayal, and decades of loss, he has remained reputable for his professionalism and quiet strength. This is why, until further information became available, people were surprised to hear his name brought up in stories regarding tension on the Mamma Mia set. It was someone else who was causing the stress, not Pierce. An A-list diva, according to sources, was the renowned co-star who had turned the happy set into a pressure cooker. Brosnan disapproved of every minute of it. According to Christine Baranski, who starred in both Mamma Mia movies, production was a nightmare because of one specific co-star in 2025. Fans and insiders immediately made assumptions despite her refusal to disclose names. Many others blamed the cast's most well-known member. However, individuals close to Brosnan explained that Pierce wasn't the issue. It was him who got hurt. Known for his kindness and tolerance on production, Brosnan had a difficult time with someone who treated staff workers like background objects, insisted on frequent rewrites, and arrived late. He nearly walked away from Mamma Mia. Here we go again, a production assistant subsequently disclosed. Mamma Mia was joined by Pierce. Following years of demanding parts in dramas, thrillers, and Bond, the movie was intended to provide a welcome change of pace. With a feel-good soundtrack and a Mediterranean setting, it felt like the ideal place for play and healing. However, instead, he was enmeshed in a creative conflict with someone who dominated the production's tone. According to another crew member, it was a guessing game every day. Would she make someone cry today, or be pleasant? That contradiction went against everything Brosnan held dear. Because of his relationship, Pierce found the matter to be more personal to the movie's ideas. Mamma Mia was about family, love, and second chances, things he treasured after losing his daughter Charlotte and wife Cassandra. Acting in the movie was more than just a job to him. It was a manifestation of feeling. His co-star, however, didn't feel that way. She allegedly viewed the movie as beneath her and made passive-aggressive comments about the other actors, the clothing, and the script. For Pierce, who had studied classical theater, mime, and Shakespeare, such disdain was intolerable. Despite the pressure of being publicly insulted, a number of crew members said that Brosnan had tried his hardest to remain composed. The actress once declared that she would not practice unless her trailer was moved closer to the site. She also insisted on changing the costumes just before the shoot. Brosnan allegedly instructed the director to just get the scene in an attempt to smooth things over. "I will adapt." But the irritation was mounting. One set decorator claimed that he detested the way she handled those around her. "He is a man who greets the gaffers with a handshake. She didn't even meet their eyes." Pierce had not been averse out of ego. It had been rooted in principles. Throughout his tenure, Pierce had built his whole career on quiet tenacity. Growing up without a father and living with various relatives, Pierce discovered the value of kindness and constancy the hard way. He became a very sympathetic human being as a result of his extremely positive encounters with loss. Therefore, it was emotionally upsetting to witness someone ruin a whole production with trivial requests and mood swings. He claimed that it brought back all of his negative feelings about Hollywood. The harshness and selfishness were eventually revealed by an old buddy. The privilege. Some tabloids tried to sway the story in favor of the actress, which made matters worse. Photographs of Brosnan, whether he was stressed or frustrated, were used as the alleged proof, which was taken to indicate that he was the one stirring up trouble. But there was a counterargument from sources close to the production. One assistant director believed that he was safeguarding people. He detested the atmosphere on set. He detested the fact that no one had the courage to face her. However, he never struck out. He simply stood back. And when the movie was eventually finished, Brosnan left a number of promotional events not out of animosity, but simply tiredness. Required time for detoxification following one of the most emotionally taxing shoots of his career. Since then, Brosnan has never publicly identified the actress, thus the quiet says a lot. He was not explicitly angry. It was long and silent. He detested the idea of an egotistical conflict in a happy setting. In his lengthy journey to achievement, the incident reminded him that there will always be some who had the ability to transform light into darkness. For Pierce Brosnan, the musical served as a reminder of one of the few actors he genuinely detested working with and one of the few business partnerships he would never rekindle, even though it was a journey of nostalgia and hilarity for audiences. For Pierce, the disorganization was less important than his disappointment with the project's intended outcome. Mamma Mia was supposed to be the bright spot after years of gloom. It was his chance to rediscover happiness and release himself from the weight of personal tragedy, bonding, and agony. Rather, it served as a reminder that poison may exist anywhere, even in the most vibrant settings. Just when you think it can't get any more vicious. Cinema shown that it could. The industry leader. If anyone in Pierce Brosnan's life evokes true animosity, it's not a critic, co-star, or actor. The anonymous executive's reign as James Bond came to an end with a single call that was devoid of emotion. After almost 10 years as 007 and 4 successful Bond movies, Brosnan was getting ready for a successful 5th appearance. In addition to maintaining in top physical condition, he has been submitting concepts for Bond 21 and coming up with storylines. But everything fell apart in 2004 on a calm afternoon in the Bahamas. At 2:47 p.m., the telephone rang. There was a middleman delivering the verdict, and the voice on the other end wasn't even that of a producer. "You made a fantastic James Bond. Thank you very much. Goodbye." No warning, no meeting, no farewell supper, no handshake. Only 47 seconds were spent in talking. For Brosnan, it was a private public execution rather than merely a fire. The highest-grossing Bond movie ever at the time, Die Another Day, had recently made $431.9 million worldwide. In addition to revitalizing a series that had all but died, Brosnan had brought Bond to a new generation with 4 films that brought in a total of almost $1.4 billion. That didn't matter. Months before, the choice had been made. The studio desired a fresh start, a younger Bond, and a renewed direction. Brosnan did not share that vision. And the man who let him go didn't even have the grace to confront him directly. Behind-the-scenes emails from the studio showed that executives had been replacing screen testers for 2 years while Pierce was still there. He had been quietly ejected, despite his belief that he was still the franchise's future. The fact that he was alone on the scene and cut off from his support system at the exact moment he was most vulnerable just made the situation worse. This strategy wasn't a coincidence, industry insiders eventually acknowledged. To put it plainly, they waited until he was alone. Resistance was not what they wanted. The dismissal of Brosnan, who had stuck with the Bond franchise through its near collapse in the 1990s, was chillingly effective. Though the identity of the responsible executive has never been made public, industry insiders are aware of him. At the time, he was a rising star at the studio who viewed Brosnan as a barrier rather than an icon or collaborator. Brosnan, in his opinion, was too Bond, too old, and too costly. His polished image had become his curse and his brand. There was nothing else that the studios could cast him in. Following his dismissal, his asking price fell from $12 million per picture to just $3 million. 12 of his team members had to be let go. Projects in progress come to an end. In 3 days, Pierce Brosnan went from being one of Hollywood's most bankable celebrities to a man who was desperately trying to reinvent himself. The emotional impact was enormous, friends would later explain. A period of silent sadness descended upon Brosnan. His kids witnessed him crying, which had hardly occurred even after their mother passed away. According to a longtime close friend, he was simply devastated. After sacrificing everything for Bond, he was just obliterated. It was more than just losing a part. The loss of his identity, years of labor, and a legacy he was still building were all at stake. The creative choice might not have been as painful as the cold way the guy himself had executed it, not merely fired, but wiped it out of existence. When the Casino Royale trailer was released, Brosnan appeared to endure the majority of his pain in silence, observing without commenting or raising any queries. According to those close to Brosnan, they could tell how hurt he was, even if he didn't say anything about it himself. NBC had blocked him with Remington Steele in the 1980s, and he had fought for the role twice after losing Cassandra Harris, the lady who had brought him the job. In the end, 1994 was not only a win for him, it was also the realization of a vow he had made to his wife. This further exacerbated the betrayal. They hadn't simply swapped him out. The very system he had fought to preserve managed to drive a knife deep into his back. Although he has refrained from publicly naming the CEO throughout the years, Brosnan's disdain is evident. He has discussed it in interviews, describing the incident as completely startling, cruel, and extremely insulting. Since then, Brosnan's career has essentially been revived in roles such as Ghost Rider, Matador, and Dr. Fate in Black Adam. But that scar is still there. This was not a personal gripe like other destroyed grudges, friends who have taken on roles, sons lost to addiction, or co-stars with egos. Systemic in nature. The corporate choice was taken detachedly. Also, the betrayal was like a dagger to the heart for a man who takes loyalty very seriously. Brosnan never returns to Bondland. Even as a member of the gathering, there are no promotional activities or cameos. Fans and the media have graciously disregarded requests for any kind of appearance. The wound must be deep. Although the executive is anonymous to the public, Pierce believes that he is the one who put a stop to a period of time that was devoid of dignity, grace, and eye contact. Throughout his lengthy and agonizing career, Brosnan is haunted by that choice. But this was followed by an even more painful stillness. The producers issued one call. No press releases, no thanking montage, no tribute to his name. Hollywood just got over it. In GoldenEye, a man who had literally put his life in danger to conduct his own stunts, such as a hair-raising bungee leap, found this to be discouraging. Please remember to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe for additional behind-the-scenes insights if you were as moved by this tale as we were. Which performer most startled you? And don't leave yet. You can explore Hollywood's unseen stories in further detail by clicking on the next video that appears on your screen.